Oral history interview. Morris Forsythe, Alpha Company, 66th Armored Infantry Battalion, 12th Armored Division. Doing the recording on the 16th of August, 2008, Abilene, Texas, 12th Armored Division Memorial Museum, along with the annual reunion. Hello, sir. I want to thank you for agreeing to sit down with me again. Side note, due to a technical problem, there was no audio on the last interview we did, which is a shame because there was a lot of great stuff in it. So, thank you for agreeing to sit down again and tell your story.
Thank you.
Now, starting out, when you first entered the Army, what did you do before you joined up?
Well, I was a farmer, and I was drafted in the Army in 1941, April 18th, 1941. Brother and me was drafted at the same time, and we stayed together several months after that.
Now, after being drafted, where did you attend your basic training?
We drafted at Leavenworth, and we were then sent to Camp Funston, Kansas in probably March 18th. About the 25th, we landed at Camp Funston, Kansas, and that's where we took our basic training at the Horse Cavalry, 2nd Cavalry.
Okay. After basic, what was your first unit of assignment? Where did you go?
We went on we stayed there and trained, and then we went on Louisiana maneuvers in September of 41. Went through the Louisiana maneuvers. We rode those horses over 1,000 miles on our training maneuvers. We come back in October 1941 at Camp Funston before the war was declared. When war was declared, December the 7th, 1941, we was loaded on our railroad cars. We was shipped out and we was going west, and you know where that thought we was going. Mm-hmm. We thought we was going to the islands, but we ended up in Phoenix, Arizona, and we guarded railroad bridges and the dams in the Mexican border, and we stayed there till June of 42, and we disbanded our horses down there, and we come back to Funston in 42 June.
Yeah. How did you come to be assigned to the 12th Armored Division?
Well, at that time when they disorganized the 2nd Cavalry, they shipped us out from there to Fort Knox, Kentucky on a cadre. We ended up in Fort Knox, and we stayed there probably 2 months, and we got shipped on a train back, and we finally ended up in Camp Camel, Kentucky. That was in 43. We trained there a while at Camp Camel. We was the first ones there at Camel when they made the camp. Then in September, October 43, we went on the Tennessee maneuvers. We come back from the Tennessee maneuvers in that year, and we stayed a while there. And I think we went to Barkley in the fall of 43, and we went to Camp Barkley.
Now, as a more experienced soldier serving as cadre, how did you find the new recruits that were coming in?
Well, we went after we got at Camel Cattleman. We was all the cattlemen. We was there probably 2 months before we got any enlisted men come into us. But we was all organized. We got to the different companies and stuff. I ended up in company of A. It was a regimental then, but I was still in company of 56. But then when we traded to battalions, I ended up in the 66th Armored Infantry, A Company.
Now, any big memories stand out? Your time at Camp Barkley, out here in Abilene, about the town or the people or the camp itself.
Well, the only thing about Camp Barkley, it was dry and hot. We go out on the lessons, and it was hot and dry, and you couldn't dig foxholes or anything in that dirt they've got here. I hated it, really. But as far as coming to Abilene, I think I was only in Abilene here probably a couple times while I was at Barkley. I didn't like the town and would come here, so I either went to Fort Worth with some boys or we stayed out at camp.
Okay, now getting ready to deploy over to England, the trip up to Camp Shanks.
Well, the only thing I remember after VD Day, we knew we was probably going overseas, and that's what they trained us for. We was told that we was going to be a main division in the war over in France, and we shipped out of Barkley and went to Camp Shanks. We stayed there, I don't know, but 3 or 4 days, I guess, before they loaded us on the boat. And the boat they put us on, I wouldn't have put a hog in it. Because I was a farmer and knew how hogs lived, and that's the way we lived going over. It was awful, pitiful. We landed in England and went to Tidwell Barracks before we went over from there.
Okay, landing in France and your first experiences.
We landed in France. We landed and we put up in some tents at first along at Luneville, I think it was. We landed there, and we was there a while, and that was in December 20th, I think it was, or somewhere in there. And we stayed there a while, and first we got up on the line. I don't know what date it was, but we was up there dug in on foxholes on a ridge. And we was there about 3 days and nights. Nothing was happening at all. We got a few artillery while we was there, but as far as nothing else. And we moved out one night, and we moved back down over the hill to get our half tracks. And everybody counted, I was a platoon sergeant. When I counted my men, it was all, one wasn't there. One sergeant wasn't there. In the meantime, artillery come in right where we was all dug in. And I waited, went back up and found this boy. He didn't know what was going on, so we moved out. And then we moved on down back somewhere, I don't know where. And that's when I lost my platoon leader, First Lieutenant Stringham. He was a wonderful lieutenant. And then after that, we moved several different places, and I can't tell you where, till we went up to the front in January the 16th.
Which brings us to the Battle of Herlisheim.
Herlisheim.
Tell me a little bit about your experiences there.
Well, it wasn't nice. Herlisheim wasn't nice. We used to go to Stingwood Forest, take that as our objective in the morning. We started out from Horde, and it was about 11 degrees above zero, and about 4 inches of snow on the ground. And we walked from 12 o'clock till that morning. We walked all that time getting to the front lines because they didn't want to know that the enemy was coming. We was coming. But they knew all the time because they was dug in. knew right where we was at, knew what time we was going to be there. And Company A of the 66th, we was on the left side, and Company B or C was on the right side of us. And I was the first on the far end of the left for the attack when all of a sudden all this broke loose, and that's when they ambushed us really. And I'll never forget what happened that day. And that's when I learned to pray that day, really pray. And it stuck with me all these years about praying. And I got wounded, and I told the boys then, some of them, my best soldiers, were laying right beside of me, killed, and it hurt pretty bad. Well, I said I wasn't staying around, so it was about 2.5 blocks back from where we was at to back to the canal we had crossed. And it took me about 3 hours to crawl that 2.5 blocks to get wounded. It took me that long to get back. If I'd have got up and run, I wouldn't have been here, because every time I got up, they were shooting at me, and I'd fall and lay there for maybe 20 minutes or more, because I knew if I got up and started running, I was done. So I out-tricked them that time. And I got back to the first aid station. And after that, I started attending these reunions. And I found out that there was only 6 boys out of my platoon survived that attack. The rest of them was either wounded or captured that day. But there was only 6 out of my platoon. And I think there was only about 85 out of our whole company that survived that attack that day, out of 250 out of the company.
Yeah. About your experiences rehabilitating, getting to the hospital, and coming back home.
Well, I got there at the aid station. Of course, they shot morphine to me. I didn't care whether, but I ended up in 3 different hospitals over there. And I finally got shipped home out of, Marseille, France, on a hospital ship. And I was probably in the middle of the ocean when I found out that things was turning different. I landed in the States. I don't know just where, somewhere in North Carolina. And I stayed there a couple of nights, and they shipped me to O'Reilly Hospital in Frankfort, Missouri. They'd operated on, I had my nerve center in my left arm persevered, and they operated on me about 7 or 8 times to tie all those nerves together. I was in the hospital for over a year, off and on, and I didn't get out till June of 1946 when I got home. And I had a brother I told you to start with. He was older, but he got in the 56th, A Company of 56th, and he went all through the service, war, and he come out, and he got discharged in 46, sometime in 46. But he made it through. And then I had an older brother, when we was on the boat going over, he was killed. And that's where the 12th Armored Division took over. Right where, afterwards I found out that's where he was killed. He was in the 5th Armored Division. And he's buried at Epinal Cemetery. And in 2001, I had the opportunity, my brother and his 2 sons, we made a trip to France and Germany to see my brother's burial in Epinal Cemetery. We rented a car, and we made the trip of the whole 12th Armored Division where they've been. And the best part about it, my nephew, my brother's boy, he was a 2-star general in the Air Force. He was stationed over there, but at that time he wasn't. But he was, and he knew in these general's quarters we stayed all this time. And if you want to talk about something beautiful in the general's quarters, you have no idea what it is.
Oh, I worked protocol for 51st Fighter Wing when I was in Korea.
And
Trust me.
we
But tell the folks a little bit about it, because it's amazing.
It's amazing. Everything was there. If you wanted anything you needed, it was there. And of course, being he was the general there, he got anything he wanted. And of course, he knew a lot of the territory around there because he'd been there several times. And we had a wonderful trip. And I don't know how many miles we traveled. In 2 weeks' time, we was there. And when we come back home, my brother had cancer. And that's when he died 2 months later after we got back. But I'll never forget the trip that we took. And that's about like, unless you want something more.
No, sir, that's fantastic. Thank you so much
All right,
for
thank
sitting
you.
down and sharing this with us.
Yeah.